Good after Morgan and welcome back to the channel. In this week's episode we refit the large subframe bushings, but before we start I want to introduce you to one of my not sponsors. This P80 emulsion was a really great assembly lubricant and it features a lot in this next episode. One of the great things about YouTube is that you can go online and have a look at what other people are doing. Whether it's right or wrong, it doesn't really matter, you just learn something. And I learned quite a lot during my research and finding out what other people did to assemble these bushings. And here's one example that I wanted to share with you to show you the difference between using, in this case, Vaseline and in my case, this emulsion. And I felt a bit sorry for this guy because he had to go to his local pharmacy and buy 1 kilo of Vaseline and he definitely got some strange looks. But let's go over this example. And I'll give you a few highlights from this episode before we get into it. So it's Vaseline versus P80 emulsion in the race of bushing champions. And whilst Vaseline does sound like a reasonable solution, it just looks like it's losing miserably against the P80. It just seems that the Vaseline is too sticky. And although it looks like I did a bit of editing magic here, I honestly timed the two processes and the P80 seemed to be a lot faster. And this poor guy's bad luck continues, and because he didn't use any lubrication on the threads, he ended up marring the threads quite badly just after one bushing install. And to add insult to injury, he wasn't actually able to get the bushing properly installed, you can see by the gap here. And some Glück, you can see I was able to get the bushing installed flush, and I think it was largely due to the P80 emulsion. So all eyes are on me now, and let's get started with this episode. As you'll have seen from previous videos, most of the parts I bought for this process were from Limferter, but unfortunately I could only get 3 bushings and I had to buy a single one from BMW, and here you can see the BMW part number. More on this in a couple of minutes. So let's just get the threads well lubricated and get the tool set up, and we install the first bushing into the subframe. I bought this tool off eBay and I have to say it's really well made and perfect for this job. I can highly recommend it to anyone else doing this. And here we go, first time opening the P80 emulsion, and I had no idea what this stuff was made of. Best way I can describe it, it has the look and consistency of milk, but doesn't taste like milk. So to help things along, a little bit of P80 on the aluminium and on the bushing itself. These bushings have to be orientated correctly, and there's an arrow on top showing which direction they should face. Now it's time for a bit of self-criticism. As I was installing the tool, I thought I was being really clever, but I did miss a key component, and if you notice, comment below. However, as you'll see, it didn't seem to make a lot of difference as we start to wind the thread and push the bushing into the subframe. It was at this point I realised the bottom cup was slightly misaligned, but it was a very simple process to unwind a little bit, readjust and keep going. The threads are nicely lubricated and the P80 is just working like a charm. The bushing starts to give a little bit of resistance near the end, but nothing that can't be handled. And it doesn't take long to get the bushing pushed home. Now let's release the tool from its duties and get stuck into the next one. So did you notice any part of the tool that I left behind? Let's make sure I use it properly in the next one. So I'm going to show you the process of doing the second bushing, mainly because I feel I did it slightly better this time, and not just because I used all the parts of the tool. So now we're going to unbox the limb bushing, and here's the part number for reference. So let's get it out and have a look and see what the difference is to the BMW OEM part. Something a little bit suspicious here. The limb is exactly the same as BMW OEM, but just with the BMW part number removed. Oh yeah, and about 75% of the cost. Oh well, let's keep going. But this time with the top plate that I left out last time. This just seems to spread the load across the top of the bushing better, and I feel that the tool actually is designed fit for purpose. The other really interesting fact about the P80 emulsion, after it dries, it disappears completely, which means the bushing is in direct contact with the aluminium and actually installed how it's meant to be. Other lubrication methods may not provide the proper connection because they never completely dry. And thanks to the super lubricated thread, the tool comes apart easily, and we're ready to move on to the third and the fourth bushing. All the spare parts are available. And here you can see the marking showing the orientation of the bushing. All present and correct. Now it's time to move on to the differential bushings, and we start with the forward diff mount. And who needs instructions anyway? So this is actually a split bushing, which means it's slightly bigger than the hole that it's intended to go into. So how to make a round peg go into a square hole, or is it a square peg into a round hole? So in order to help me with this, I bought a series of different sizes of stainless steel worm drive hose clamps, and it was just a matter of picking the right size. Once the bushing was clamped, I set about picking the right size of press tool, some more of that lovely P80. It's a good thing I bought a litre of this stuff. And with the bushing partially through, it was time to remove the clamp and continue threading until the bush was all the way through. Here you can actually see how quickly the P80 dries, so a quick top up to make sure the diff bushing can get pushed the whole way home. And there's always time for a third top up as well. And here you can see the final position with the P80 completely dry. The bushing is holding perfectly tight in place. And we use more or less the same process for the two rear diff mount bushings. Although these are a slightly different construction and don't have a split, it just makes it a bit more straightforward to push them into their mounting position. The black marker just helps me make sure that the orientation is correct the entire time the bush is being pushed through. One done, one to go. And here you can see that P80 is already dried on the right hand side bushing, and in the next few seconds you'll see it start to dry on the left as well. And with that, the entire subframe has been rebushed. So here's a short recap of what we did in this episode. Completely unbushed subframe, partially bushed, fully bushed. Are you getting tired of me saying bush? But finally, after 7 episodes, we can now actually start putting this thing back together. And it starts with laying the newly refreshed diff and putting the subframe on top. But unfortunately, that's the end of this episode, and you'll have to tune in for episode 8 to watch the entire rebuild process and get this subframe ready to get back in the car. So, see you next time, and thanks for watching.